important, because when you focus on what you get right during an exam, before and during the exam, this will determine how you perform in your calculations and also in your open book. What does this mean? Now, I'll give an example. When you start the exam, when you walk into the exam, imagine you went in the exam and you did the first paper, which is your calculations. And the first question you did with the calculations, you did not know. It was difficult. And you moved on to the second question, and that too was difficult. How would you feel for the rest of the exam? What do you say to yourself at this point? Do you say to yourself you're going to fail? Do you say to yourself you're already failing? Or do you stay positive and move on to the exam? What most people do at this stage is they start focusing on these questions they're already getting wrong. So in your mind, what starts playing up in your mind are negative statements. All these things you're getting wrong starts playing up in your mind, and this is what you believe. And going back to the first diagram I showed you, these thoughts then affect your feelings. You start feeling discouraged, you start feeling negative, you start feeling down, and eventually it affects your performance for the other questions. A second thing is, after the exams, once you've done your calculations, what you notice when you go out of the exam hall or the exam room is that many students are going to get together, some of them your friends, to discuss the answers. Now, if you discuss these answers and you found out that there were a few questions you got wrong, this begins to play in your mind, and this is going to stop you from performing well in your second paper, which is the open book. Because now you have this negative thoughts from your calculations, and you're saying to yourself you're going to fail, and now you have another exam paper to do, and you're not in the right state to perform as good as you would have been if you only focus on the questions you got right. Does this make sense? So that's why it's so important. It's absolutely crucial that you only focus on the answer, on the questions you get right. Don't focus on any question you get wrong, because it's going to affect the rest of the exam, it's going to affect the rest of the calculations, and it's going to affect your open book. So focus on what you get right and not on what you get wrong. If you're ready for habit number 3, I want you to just say habit number 3. Habit number 3, very important habit. You can't learn everything. You can't learn everything. This is what we call perfection paralysis. And perfection paralysis happens to most people before the period exam and during the revision. And perfection paralysis is when you try to learn everything. You try to be so perfect that at the end you become paralyzed mentally. And it happens where many students have gone into the period exam and have completely frozen, because they've tried to learn everything that when they've gone into the exam, the little things that they used to know, they can't remember anymore. So confidence doesn't come from learning everything. Confidence comes from being confident with the little you know. So one of the first things you want to do is you want to make sure that you've spent time to understand your syllabus, to learn the syllabus. This is the most important. You want to get on that GPHC website and you want to learn the syllabus and learn about the different weightings, which you probably already know, but you need to know what sort of topics carry more weightings than others. And there are certain things you absolutely must learn. So what I advise most students, and when I was doing some coaching sessions last year, was that my advice is that you need to master certain key topics, and then you just need to be aware of others. So master key topics, but be aware of others. You cannot be a master of every single topic. You are not supposed, or you're not obliged to learn every single thing. So at this point, you need to stop trying to memorize the whole BNF. What you want to do is master the key topics and then be aware of others. A second thing is you must learn from past failures. And there is a site, the GPHC, the last few years have released documents. The GPHC has got an assessment board. And this assessment board, after each period exam, releases the questions which most students failed on. Most of them are things like the calculations, displacement values, the couple of things that have been written where most students fail. So you want to make sure that one of the key things that you learn is that you go through this, and I've got another presentation, I've got another guide which you could check on my website, and it's going to be about this. It's called Questions, Pre-Reg Questions from Hell. So you can go on and you can download this as well, and it basically shows you the questions which most students have failed in the past years. And you want to learn this, and you want to master and get better at these questions, because these questions can literally differentiate between a pass and a fail. So they're absolutely important. These are one of the things you want to learn. So you don't need to learn everything, but you need to master key topics, learn the key things, and then be aware of others. You need to also know, why don't you need to learn everything? Because you have a failure allowance. We've got 40 calculations. Out of those 40 calculations, do you need to pass all of them? Yes or no? Do you need to have 40 calculations correct? No. You have an allowance. You can fail up to 12 questions. So you need to pass 28 of them to get 70%, if my math is right. But you have an allowance to fail certain calculations. So it's so important that you focus on this once you start doing your calculations. If you fail the first question and you fail the second question and you think you failed the third question, you still have a very high chance of passing. And so you need to fail the first one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And you still have 70%. And this is what you need to start thinking. Once you start your exam, if there's anything you get wrong, any question, don't worry about it. You have an allowance to fail. You have an allowance to fail certain questions. So don't kill yourself. What you want to do, as I mentioned earlier, focus on what you get right. Focus on the things that are working. Remember the questions that you're confident about, that you know absolutely these are correct. That's what should be playing in your head. And what you notice is that this confidence is going to translate into the next questions, and you're going to perform even better in the next questions. So you can't learn everything. As I mentioned before, being confident with what you already know is more important than trying to learn everything. You will be more confident, that's for sure, if you learn more things, and I will encourage you to learn as much as you can. But if before the exam there are certain things you've not covered, all I'm saying is don't kill yourself, because that should still not stop you from passing your exam. So what you want to do is be confident with what you already know. Perfect what you already know, and don't try to master everything. So you can't learn everything. Habit number 4. This is very interesting one, and this is one which happens a lot with the students that I coach. See things as they truly are. See things as they truly are. Why? Because we generally have a tendency to generalize things. There are 3 things that are going to happen, that happens to most students, to most people during the pre-reg exam, or before this, during the revision, or before they take the exam. The first thing is generalizations, the second assumptions, and the third metaphors. So let's look at the first one, generalizations. One of the first things is most students, or most people before the exam, tend to generalize. And I remember when I was doing a coaching session with one of the students, and one of her biggest challenges and what was affecting her performance was generalizations. Because generalizations are the things that you say, the general statements, like, I can't remember anything, I get everything wrong. So she called me and she was nervous, and she was crying, and she was worried, and she kept saying to me, she's going to fail, she's going to fail. And so I asked her, why are you going to fail? Why do you think you're going to fail? And she said, Marvin, it's because I can't remember anything. So I said, you can't remember anything? Is there at least even one thing you can remember? And she goes, oh yeah, there's just one. I said, oh, so you can remember something then? I said, yeah, a few things. I said, yes, so but you said you can't remember anything. So this is very powerful, because again, what I said to you earlier is that what you say, what you focus on is what you get. When you say you can't remember anything, your mind continuously thinks you can't remember anything, and that affects your feelings, that affects your performance. So rather than use generalization, say things as they truly are. And so I began to uncover many things with her, and I found out that there were just a few things that she cannot remember. But she does remember so many other things. But because she's in a state of generalization, she forgets the other things that she already knows, and she focuses only on what she doesn't know, and she blows it out of proportion, that she believes that she doesn't know anything. And the second thing is, when she was doing past paper, she said to me, "Marvin, I'm getting everything wrong." And I said, "Everything? Did you get at least 1 or 2 questions right?" She said, "I'm getting all my calculations wrong." I said, "All your calculations?" There were 40 calculation questions. So how many did you get right? And she went, "Yeah, I got the first one right. Yes, the second one right. Yeah, I did. Third one, yes, I got right. Fourth one, yes, I got right. Fifth one, I got right. Oh, sixth one, no, I didn't get that one right. Oh, but the seventh, I got right." And she went on. And at the end, I found out that she only failed 6 questions. But because she failed six calculation questions, and she was focusing on what she got wrong rather than what she got right, she said to me she failed everything, and she believes she's failing everything. So it's very important that you look at your generalizations, and that you do not generalize negatively, but you make positive generalizations. So that's the first thing you need to do. The second thing where most students fail is because of assumptions. Assumptions. Again, many students I coach, I had a couple of students that were stressed because of certain assumptions they were making unconsciously. And this student was crying the same thing to me, and she said to me, "Marvin, the exam is going to be so hard this year." And I asked her, "Why do you think that?" She said, "Because it's a new system." This was last year, 2016. She said, "The exams have changed. I have spoken to people," and this was in June 2016. She said, "I've spoken to people, and everyone has told me the exams will be harder this year. So it's my assumption that the exams will be harder this year." And she was so stressed, and this was affecting her performance, and I had to uncover this as well with her. So I had to try to uncover, where do these beliefs come from? This is an assumption, but we don't have any evidence. Unless you're a magician, because nobody else knows about this. No one's even seen the exam yet, but you seem to be so certain 100% that the exam will be harder this year. And so I asked her questions. Where is the evidence for this? Why do you think that way? Why do you believe this? And this is already affecting you and affecting your performance. And so we went through that, and she began to change, and she started to realize that she cannot say that because nobody knows. So we don't know whether the exam will be harder. We don't know whether it's going to be easier. But what we do know is that we're going to do our best, so that whatever paper comes to us, we're going to do our best. So see things as they are. And the reality is, nobody knows what these exams will be until they've seen it. So don't think it's going to be harder. So that's the first thing. Another assumption, I spoke to a student, and this student literally said to me, "Marvin, Black African students always perform less. And so the exams will be tougher for me because I'm a Black African student." I thought, this is an assumption. Yes, the past results might have shown this sort of trend, but assuming that because you're a Black African student, that means you're going to perform less, is an assumption that affects you, and that's going to affect your performance negatively. And finally, I had other students that said to me, the exams in September are always tougher. The exams are always tougher. So I'm expecting to have a very tough exam, and I'm going to fail again because I did it in June, and I'm going to fail in September because the September ones are always tougher. Now, all these students, interesting thing, all these students I coached and I worked with, all of them passed the exams first time, 100%. And when they passed the exams, was after the coaching session, they changed their mind. They had the knowledge, but they were stuck mentally. And once we aligned the mental awareness with the clinical knowledge, and we got them back on the right frame of mind, the right state, they were able to perform outstandingly. So assumptions. And the final things are metaphors. And metaphors are things that words that we use, descriptions that we use unconsciously to describe a situation. But there are certain words that you use for your pre-reg exam that you need to start looking at, and that's going to affect how you perform. So when you think, let me ask you a question, when you think of the pre-reg exam, what do you see? Do you see a lion? or do you see a cat? Do you see a little rock or do you see a mountain? Is there a heavy weight on your shoulders when you think of a pre-reg exam, or do you think of a light weight? So this is very important, the metaphors that you use to describe your feelings about the pre-reg exam, your feelings about what the exam will be like, your feelings about what this represents to you. These metaphors, these descriptions, again, this will affect your thoughts, that will affect the way you feel, that are going to affect your performance. So it's very important you make the right generalizations, you make the right assumptions, and you choose the right metaphors that will empower you to succeed and not disempower you. Does this make sense? So what we're going to do now is a little exercise, and I'm going to get you to write down a few generalizations that will empower you, a few assumptions, and a few metaphors. I'm going to show an example. You can look at this table. So I've got one area or one section for generalizations, and what I want you to do now is to write down a few generalizations which you make about the pre-reg exam. So you could, this is an example. June exams, you can complete the statement. June exams are always, calculations are always, all open book questions this year will be, all September exams are. So I want you to write down a few positive generalizations. For example, June exams are always easier. Calculations are always good, or calculations are always manageable. All open book questions this year will be good or will be easy. All September exams are worth passing or easy to pass. So I just want you to write down anything, because what you want to see is that there's a famous statement that says, whether you think something is or you think it's not, you're right. Okay? Whether you think you can do something or you think you can't do it, you're right, because it's a belief. So your beliefs are not negative or positive. It's whatever belief you choose, because again, I said, when you choose a belief, that's what you're going to focus on. So there's no right or wrong belief. It's what you choose, and that becomes your reality. That's why it's so important you make positive generalizations. So you have a choice. You can either choose to believe that the exam in June is going to be difficult, or you can choose to believe the exam in June is going to be easy. But whatever you choose, you're right, because that's exactly what you're going to experience. If you choose to believe the exam is going to be difficult, then the exam will be difficult. If you choose to believe you're going to fail, you are going to fail. If you choose to believe the exam is going to be easy, the exam will be easy. And if you choose to believe you're going to pass, you're going to pass. So I want you to write down your generalizations now. Once you finish that, I want you to write down a few assumptions which you make about the exam. So assumptions will be things like the exam this year will be, the calculations this year will be, right? So what assumptions are you making? So write down a few positive assumptions. Write down those positive assumptions, a bit similar to generalizations, but just positive assumptions. And finally, I want you to write down a few metaphors to describe the exam. So for example, the exam is like, so fill that in. So how would you describe the pre-reg exam to you, right? So I want you to write that down and write a few positive metaphors. For example, the exam is like ABC, easy. The exam is like a little rock. The exam is like a kitten. The exam is like a puppy. So whatever metaphor, that's just things that have come in my head. But anything that you can use to describe the exam, I want you to write down a metaphor, and write down a positive metaphor that you can use to represent the possibility of you passing this exam, something which is going to ignite you and something which is going to push your emotions positively so that you have an outstanding performance. So take a few moments now and do this exercise. Okay, so that's fine. So you can pause it and finish the exercise, and then you can move on. So let's move on to the next thing. So principle number 5.